Single mother goes to a job interview with her twin daughters because she has no one to leave them with. As they enter the mansion, one of the girls looks at the billionaire and asks, "Are you going to be our dad?" He laughs, but when he sees the mother, he freezes. The alarm clock didn't even need to ring. Claire Wells was already awake when the first rays of morning light slipped through the thin curtains. 3 minutes later, right on cue, the sound of giggling flooded the hallway. Her twin daughters, Junie and Lila, both bundles of energy even before breakfast, were already bouncing on the bed in the next room. "Mommy, we're hungry," one of them shouted, probably Junie, the more talkative of the two. Claire smiled, rubbing her eyes. Her body begged for a few more hours of rest. But life didn't grant that luxury, especially not today, especially not with a job interview scheduled. The place they lived in was far too small for big dreams, but big enough for the hugs they shared. Late rent, peeling walls, a faucet that never stopped dripping. Claire sat on the bed and looked at her hands, calloused, with short nails and traces of dirt under the cuticles that never fully went away. The hands of someone who knew the weight of soil and tools. "I'm coming, my flowers." In the cramped kitchen, improvisation was the rule. She opened the fridge and found only a bit of milk and a few pieces of fruit. The pantry offered little else: oatmeal, cinnamon, a half-empty jar of honey. Claire sighed, but she refused to be discouraged. Not today. "Do you want oatmeal with cinnamon or oatmeal with banana?" The girls appeared at the kitchen door, barefoot in colorful pajamas, their dark hair in complete disarray. "Both," they answered in unison, laughing as if they'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Claire prepared breakfast while the girls drew pictures at the table, using colored pencils so worn down that some were just tiny stubs. Their drawings always revolved around the same theme: gardens, flowers, trees, plants that looked like they came from another world, born of the limitless imagination only children possess. "Are we going with you today?" asked Lila, who was quieter and more observant than her sister. "Yes, sweetie." Claire ran her hands under the faucet and tried to tame the girl's wild hair, a morning ritual. "Mommy has an important interview. A chance to take care of the garden at a big house. Can we help?" Junie grinned, revealing the gap where a baby tooth had fallen out. "You'll have to stay real quiet, remember? Like we agreed?" They nodded with such earnestness that Claire almost laughed. But she knew that promise wouldn't last long. Children have way too much energy to remain silent for long. After breakfast came the usual rush: simple but clean clothes, hair pulled back, improvised backpacks with snacks and some paper for drawing. Claire chose her best outfit, a light blue blouse and jeans that, though worn at the knees, still looked decent. No makeup, just a bit of pale lipstick. She looked at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror and saw the fatigue of 3 years doing temporary jobs, tending other people's gardens, struggling to give her daughters what they deserved. The bus was late, as always. The three of them waited at the bus stop, Claire carrying a plastic folder with her few certificates and references. The sun was already growing warm when they finally boarded. The girls sat together, sharing the window, while Claire stood, holding onto a metal bar. New city, life rebuilt. Claire had moved here just 6 months ago, after her last steady job ended when the family she worked for moved abroad. Starting over had become a skill she'd mastered, first when she discovered she was pregnant, then when she found herself alone with 2 newborns, and now trying to settle somewhere no one knew her name or her story. The bus rattled, stopping at every corner. Weariness weighed on Claire's shoulders. Physical exhaustion, yes, but more than that, the fatigue of someone carrying fragile hopes like eggs in a basket. She'd already tried 3 interviews that week, all unsuccessful. "Mommy." Lila's voice was soft, almost a whisper. Claire leaned in to listen. "I dreamed about our house last night." "Oh yeah. What was it like?" "It was full of flowers. So many you couldn't count, and there was a garden just for us." Claire felt a warmth in her chest. Her daughters never complained, never asked for expensive toys or brand-name clothes. All they wanted was what she wanted too: stability, a place to call home. "One day, my love, one day we'll have that." The bus stopped along a tree-lined avenue. Claire checked the scrap of paper where she'd written the address. There was still one more stop to go, but she decided to get off early and walk the rest of the way. The girls needed to stretch their legs before the interview. On the sidewalk shaded by old trees, the three of them walked hand in hand. With each step, the neighborhood changed. Bigger houses, more elaborate gardens, imported cars in the driveways. Claire felt her stomach tighten. Insecurity, a sense of not belonging. What if they don't like me? She thought, biting her lower lip. At that moment, she felt a small squeeze on her left hand. She looked down and met Junie's big, confident eyes. "Mommy, you're the best gardener in the whole world. They're going to love you." Claire smiled, unable to explain how those simple words were exactly what she needed to hear. She straightened her posture, took a deep breath, and kept walking. Each house number grew larger. They were almost there. Rounding the corner, they stopped. At the end of the street, imposing and set apart from the other residences, a mansion rose behind a wrought iron gate. The front garden, visible even from a distance, looked abandoned. Wilted flowers, untrimmed shrubs, uneven lawn. "This is it," Claire said, feeling her heart pound. Lila squeezed her hand. "The flowers are sad, Mommy." Claire bent down to their eye level. "Then we'll make them smile again, okay?" The two girls nodded, their faces glowing with that children's confidence that everything is possible. Claire straightened up, tucked the folder under her arm, and took the first step toward the gate. It was just a job interview, but it felt like she was stepping into something bigger, something that would change their lives forever. The iron gate creaked as Claire pushed it open. It felt almost too heavy for her hands, as if testing her determination before even letting her in. For a rare moment, the girls were silent, staring wide-eyed at the mansion. "Is it a castle, Mommy?" Lila whispered, clutching Claire's hand. The mansion, built in Victorian style, dominated the view with its turrets, stained glass windows, and a marble staircase leading to the main entrance. The garden, however, contrasted with the elegance of the structure. It was neglected, with shapeless beds and plants in desperate need of care. "No, sweetheart, it's just a very big house," Claire said, trying to sound confident as they walked up the stone path. With every step, Claire noticed more details of the abandoned garden. Rose bushes that needed pruning, shrubs growing out of control, vines creeping over walls that should have been kept clear. To untrained eyes, it was merely a neglected yard. To Claire, it was a blank canvas waiting for new life. They hadn't even reached the front door before it opened. A tall, thin man, impeccably poised with carefully combed grey hair, appeared in the doorway. He wore a dark suit that, despite being classic, didn't look the least bit uncomfortable on him. "Ms. Wells, I presume?" His voice was formal, but the slight smile softened his tone. Claire nodded, trying to hide her nerves. "Yes, that's me. I'm here for the gardener position." "Exactly. I'm Harlan, the butler of the Lawrence residence." He gave a small nod, almost a bow, then looked at the girls. His gaze showed neither surprise nor disapproval, just kind curiosity. "And who might these young ladies be?" "They're my daughters," Claire explained quickly. "Junie and Lila. I had no one to leave them with. I hope that's not a problem. They behave well." That last part was almost a silent prayer. Harlan offered a friendlier smile this time. "Not at all, Miss Wells. Mr. Lawrence appreciates honesty. Please, come in." Inside, the mansion was even more impressive. A large entrance hall with polished hardwood floors that reflected the natural light from tall windows, gilded framed paintings decorated the walls, and a crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling. The girls looked up in wonder, nearly tripping as they walked. Claire held tightly to their hands, afraid they might touch something valuable. "This way, please." Harlan guided them down a wide corridor to a room with large windows overlooking the back of the property. "If you could wait here, I'll inform Mr. Lorenz you've arrived." When they were alone, Claire knelt down in front of the girls. "Remember what we talked about. Stay really quiet and don't touch anything, okay?" They both nodded solemnly. Claire smiled, knowing this vow of silence would be short-lived. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at what might be her future workplace, if she was lucky. The backyard was huge, with a design that must once have been magnificent. She could see traces of a hedge maze, a central fountain that hadn't run in years, and flower beds practically begging for care. I could spend months here and still have work left to do, she thought, imagining how she would transform the space. Lost in thought, Claire didn't immediately notice that Junie was no longer at her side. When she did, she turned quickly and saw the girl had opened a side door leading to the garden. "Junie," she called in a low voice, trying not to yell. "Come back here now." Claire ran to the door, Lila close behind. Outside, she saw Junie walking resolutely toward a man who had his back to them, standing near an old oak tree in the center of the garden. Claire's heart pounded. She ran faster, but before she could reach her daughter, Junie had already approached the man. "Are you going to be our dad?" The question, posed with the innocence and directness only children possess, echoed through the quiet garden. Claire froze in horror a few feet away. The man turned slowly. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair with a slight wave, and intense green eyes that caught the sunlight. He wore casual clothes, clearly expensive, dark pants and a shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. A moment of confusion crossed his face as he looked at Junie. Then, slowly, his gaze lifted to Claire. It felt like the world stopped spinning. Sarton Hale Lawrence, 10 years older. A few new lines around his eyes, but unmistakably him. The same man Claire had loved with a fire that burned any chance of a normal future. The same man she had run from, without explanations or goodbyes. Claire. It wasn't a question. It was barely more than a sigh. As though he had kept her name inside for all this time, waiting for the right moment to release it. Claire couldn't breathe. The memories came in waves. Their first meeting in Botany College, talking until dawn, fierce arguments followed by even fiercer reconciliations. The last night together when she decided they couldn't keep destroying each other. Sutton. Her voice was steadier than she expected. Junie looked from one to the other, confused by the sudden tension in the air. Lila joined her and took her sister's hand, as if sensing something important was happening. "You know him, Mommy?" Junie asked innocently. Claire swallowed. "Yes, honey. We knew each other a long time ago." Sutton still hadn't moved. His eyes roamed over Claire as if trying to determine whether she was real or just an apparition. Then, slowly, they traveled down to the girls. Claire saw the unspoken question in his gaze. "They're my daughters," she said quickly. "Junie and Lila." Something flickered across Sutton's face. Relief. Disappointment. It was impossible to tell. He crouched down to the girl's eye level. "Pleased to meet you, ladies. I'm Sutton Lorenz. This is my home." The girls looked at him curiously. Lila, always the most observant, studied his face as though searching for something familiar. "You have a really big garden," Lila noted, "but the flowers look sad." A slight smile appeared on Sutton's lips. "That's why your mum is here, to make them smile again." At that moment, Harlan appeared at the door. "Ah, I see you've already found our employer, Ms. Wells." There was a note of surprise in his voice. "Mr. Lorenz, Ms. Wells has arrived for the gardener interview." Sutton stood, his gaze never leaving Claire's. "No formal interview necessary, Harlan. Ms. Wells is hired." His voice was controlled, professional. "I trust her gardening skills completely." The butler looked momentarily surprised, but nodded. "Very well, sir. Shall I prepare the usual paperwork?" "Please, and show Ms. B. Wells the property perimeter and the tool shed. She should have everything she needs." Harlan nodded again and addressed Claire. "If you would follow me, ma'am." Claire hesitated, still caught in Sutton's gaze. So many unspoken things hung in the air between them. 10 years of silence compressed into a single moment. "I can start tomorrow morning," she finally managed. Sutton merely nodded, his face a mask of calm. Claire took her daughter's hands and followed Harlan, feeling the weight of Sutton's stare on her back as she walked away. In the weeks that followed, Claire threw herself into the garden with almost feverish dedication. She worked from dawn, cutting dead branches, pulling weeds, redesigning flower beds. The girls came with her every day, playing among the trees or helping with small tasks. Harlan had arranged a special corner in the garden just for them, with a small table and art supplies. a gesture that surprised Claire with its thoughtfulness. Sutton rarely appeared during the day. Claire only caught glimpses of him at a distance, working in his office or talking to Harlan, but she knew he was watching. Sometimes, when she looked up at the mansion's windows, she'd spot him for a second before he vanished. It was a silent dance, neither of them ready to break the carefully maintained distance. At night in her little home, Claire would find memories flooding back. Sutton at 25, passionate and intense, with dreams too big for normal conversations. She at 20, impressed by his intelligence and ambition, but scared by the sheer intensity of everything. They had loved each other like fire, burning everything in their path, including themselves. Fights that started over trivial things and escalated to deep wounds. Words spoken in the heat of the moment that could never be taken back. Reconciliations that seemed to mend everything until the next storm. Until one day, Claire realized they couldn't go on, that they were destroying each other. That love, no matter how strong, wasn't enough without maturity. And she left without warning, believing a clean break would hurt less for both of them. Now, 10 years later, she saw a different Sutton, calmer, more centered. The years had softened his edges without dimming his presence. She had changed, too. Motherhood had transformed her, granting patience and strength she never knew she had. The hardships of recent years had taught her to value stability over reckless passion. In the third week of her new job, Claire was kneeling in a flower bed, transplanting lavender seedlings, when she sensed someone behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. "The flowers are coming back to life," Sutton remarked, closer than she expected. Claire kept working, trying to keep her hands steady. They were never really dead. They just needed care. Silence. Claire finally turned around. Sutton watched her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Why didn't you say goodbye?" His question was gentle, not accusing. A lump formed in Claire's throat. "Because I didn't know how. Because I was afraid that if I saw you one more time, I wouldn't be able to leave." Sutton nodded slowly, as though her answer finally made sense to him, after all these years. "And the girls? They—" He left the question unfinished. "They're not yours, if that's what you're asking." Claire kept her voice firm. "They're 7. I had a relationship after you." It didn't last. Something shifted in Sutton's expression. Relief. Claire hadn't expected that. "They're extraordinary," he said sincerely. "They remind me of you, that same curiosity in their eyes." Claire smiled, feeling that familiar surge of pride whenever someone praised her daughters. "Thank you." Sutton knelt beside her, picking up a small trowel. He started working in the flower bed, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I still remember everything you taught me about gardening," he said. Claire watched him work, noticing that his movements were indeed skillful for someone whose garden looked so neglected. "You never hired another gardener after Mr. Bennett retired?" Sutton kept his eyes on the soil. "I hired several. None stayed for long." Claire understood what he wasn't saying. None met the standard she'd set. The thought gave her a strange satisfaction. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds being their tools in the earth and, in the distance, the girls' laughter as they played near the now-functioning fountain. "You seem happy," Sutton finally said. "A different, but at peace." Claire thought about his words. "I am. Not in the way I imagined at 30, but yes. The girls are my joy." Sutton nodded, his green eyes softened by the late afternoon sun. "How about you?" Claire asked, feeling it was fair to return the question. "Are you happy?" He seemed to weigh that question seriously. "I have everything I planned. The company is a success. The mansion I always wanted." He paused, gazing toward the horizon. "But happy? I'm still learning what that truly means." The sound of running footsteps cut their conversation short. Junie was racing toward them, Lila just behind, both clutching handfuls of wildflowers. "Mommy, Mr. Sutton!" "We made little bouquets for you." Claire and Sutton stood, accepting the flowers the girls offered with the solemnity one would grant a valuable gift. Claire felt a rush of emotion seeing Sutton bend down to thank them with genuine seriousness, as though the small bouquets were precious beyond measure. The girls soon dashed off to play again, leaving the adults alone once more. Sutton twirled the little bouquet in his fingers, looking at the simple flowers as if they held some secret. "Thank you for the work you're doing here," he said at last, glancing around the garden that was slowly reviving. It was time for this place to come back to life. Claire nodded, understanding he was talking about more than just the plants. "Sometimes, all we need is someone who cares enough to try." His eyes locked with hers for one intense moment, before he turned to head back inside. Claire watched him walk toward the house, his tall silhouette outlined by the afternoon sun, and felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: hope. Morning broke grey, with low-hanging clouds that promised rain. Claire arrived earlier than usual, hoping to get a head start on the east flower beds before the downpour. The girls were still asleep when she left, entrusted to a retired neighbor who adored their company. The garden was silent, shrouded in a gentle mist that gave the plants an almost magical appearance. Claire took a deep breath, savoring the smell of damp earth and newly planted flowers. In just a few weeks, the place was already showing clear signs of recovery: organized beds, pruned rose bushes, the central fountain gurgling once more. She headed to the tool shed to gather what she needed. Upon opening the door, she nearly dropped the seed box she was carrying. Sutton was inside, seated on a wooden stool, as if waiting for her. "I'm sorry," he said, standing up. "I didn't mean to startle you." Claire composed herself, setting the box on the workbench. "It's all right. I just wasn't expecting anyone here this early." "I knew you'd come. You always arrive before sunrise on Wednesdays." The fact he'd noticed her work pattern surprised her. Claire picked up some tools, trying to seem busy. "Did you need anything? Harlan mentioned you might want to change the hedge maze design, but I haven't drawn up the sketches yet." "It's not about the garden," Sutton said softly. "It's about us." Claire froze, pruning shears halfway into her tool bag. "There is no us how Sutton. Not anymore." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Claire remembered so well. "But there are questions left unanswered for 10 years. Suddenly, the shed felt too small, the air heavy with memories and unspoken words. Claire set her tools aside and met his gaze. "What do you want to know? Why you left like that, without warning, without explanation? You just disappeared." The question hung in the air, laden with a decade's worth of pain. Claire knew she owed him an answer. She took a deep breath, sorting through the thoughts she had locked away. "Because we didn't know how to love each other without getting hurt," she finally said. "Every conversation turned into an argument. Every argument left scars. We were destroying each other. Sutton." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the dirt floor. "We were young, too intense. It wasn't just youth. It was pride, stubbornness. Neither of us knew how to yield." Claire leaned back against the workbench, feeling an old weariness creep up her spine. "I remember our last fight. You said I was suffocating your dreams. I said you never truly listened to me." "And we were both right," Sutton added, giving a sad smile. Silence settled between them, more comfortable than she'd have expected. Outside, the first raindrops began to tap on the shed's roof, creating a gentle background lullaby. "I looked for you," Sutton said after a moment. "For months. No one knew where you'd gone. I went west, worked at a plant nursery, then on a lavender farm." Claire felt her throat tighten. "I needed a fresh start. Away from anything that reminded me of us. And then you met the father of the girls." It wasn't a question, but Claire nodded. "Mark. He was a landscaper. We worked together for almost a year before getting involved." She glanced at her hands, marked by constant work in the soil. "When I found out I was pregnant, he was already leaving for another state. Said he wasn't ready to be a father." A flash of anger crossed Sutton's green eyes. "He left you before they were even born?" "Yes. I never heard from him again." Claire shrugged, an attempt at nonchalance that failed to hide the hurt. The girls never asked much about their dad. "I guess for them it's always just been the three of us." The rain picked up, drumming more insistently on the roof. Its sound formed a bubble around them, as if separating them from the rest of the world. "You were brave," Sutton said softly. "Raising 2 kids alone can't have been easy." "It wasn't. But they're the best thing that ever happened to me." A genuine smile lit Claire's face. "Everything was worth it." Sutton watched her with an expression she couldn't decipher, some mix of admiration and sorrow. "You know what's ironic?" he said. "All those fights about the future, about what we wanted, and in the end you got what you always dreamed of." "What do you mean?" "A family, children, a garden to care for." He gestured outside to the garden, now under renovation. "You always said you wanted to settle down, have kids, work with your hands in the earth. And I could only think about the next conquest, the next rung on the corporate ladder." Claire had never seen it that way. It was true, despite all the difficulties, her life now contained the essentials she had once wished for. "And you?" she asked. "Did you get what you wanted? The company, the success, the dream mansion?" "I got all that." Sutton paused, gazing out the open door at the falling rain. "But I discovered that a big house is just a big house when you're in it alone." The honesty in his voice caught Claire off guard. The Sutton she'd known years ago would never have admitted vulnerability so readily. "I'm not sure why the garden became so neglected," he went on. "Maybe no one cared enough, or maybe subconsciously I was waiting for you to come back and tend it." Claire didn't know how to respond. 10 years of distance, and still there was a part of him that could touch places in her she thought were closed forever. "We've both changed," she said finally. "For the better, I hope." The rain began to lessen, but neither made a move to leave. There was comfort in that simple shed, as if it were neutral ground where past and present could coexist without conflict. "The girls like you," Claire commented, breaking the silence, "especially Junie. She wonders why you don't come to the garden more often with us." A genuine smile broke across Sutton's face. "They're amazing, smart, curious. Lila showed me yesterday how she can identify different types of butterflies near the lantanas." "She's always been observant, ever since she was little." Sutton hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "Claire, I don't want to complicate your life. I know there's a lot between us that can't just be forgotten, but I want you to know I'm glad you're here. I'm glad all three of you are here." Claire felt a warmth blossom in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't passion nor lust, it was calmer, more mature. A recognition that time had tempered the edges that once cut them both. "Thank you," she said simply. The rain had stopped completely, leaving only the dripping of water from the leaves. A ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the soaked garden. "I guess that's my cue to go back to work," Sutton said, heading for the door. "Harlan is waiting for me for a video conference in 10 minutes. Claire nodded, picking up her tools again. As Sutton was almost out of the shed, she called, "Sutton." He turned, one eyebrow raised in question. "I don't regret leaving back then. We wouldn't have survived as we were. But," she hesitated, gathering courage for honesty, "I regret not saying goodbye." His eyes softened. Maybe some stories don't need a goodbye, just a new chapter. With those words, he stepped out into the rain-soaked garden, leaving Claire with a strange sense of peace. As though, after 10 years, she had finally found a long-lost piece of her life's puzzle and put it in its rightful place. The days after their talk in the shed brought a subtle but noticeable shift. Like roots slowly stretching beneath the soil, something began to change in the daily rhythm of the garden. Claire noticed it on a Thursday, when she found Sutton helping Harlan unload bags of fertilizer from a delivery truck. He had swapped his suit for jeans and a plain t-shirt. His hands, once always immaculate, now showed traces of soil under his nails. He waved at her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The following day, he appeared while Claire was planting new flowers around the fountain. Without a word, he grabbed a watering can and started watering the seedlings she'd just placed. They worked side by side for almost an hour, sharing a comfortable silence broken only by the sound of water falling on leaves and an occasional bird call. "The girls asked if they can plant sunflowers," he finally said, breaking the silence. "I told them they'd have to talk to you first." Claire smiled. "They love sunflowers. They say they're happy flowers because they always face the sun. There's a perfect spot for them by the western wall. It gets morning sun all day." There was something different about Sutton, a relaxed posture, a softness in his gaze that Claire couldn't recall seeing before, as if, after so many years chasing achievements, he'd finally allowed himself to simply live in the present. On Saturday, Claire brought the girls in early. They found Sutton already in the garden, working the soil of an empty bed with a box of sunflower seeds beside him. Junie's eyes lit up. "Can we help?" she asked, already moving closer without waiting for an answer. "Of course, I've been waiting for you." Sutton knelt down to be at their level. "Do you know how to plant sunflowers?" Lila, always more serious, frowned in concentration. "We make holes with our fingers, put the seeds in, then cover them with soil, and water them every day." "Exactly," he smiled, impressed. "Your mom taught you well." The girls knelt next to him, their small hands quickly getting dirty. Claire watched from a distance, feeling a strange emotion swell inside her. Something deeply moving about the scene. The tall man and the two little girls, all focused on the simple act of planting seeds. He wasn't trying to win them over with grand gestures. He wasn't asking too many questions or offering extravagant gifts. He was just present, genuinely interested in what they had to say, patiently answering their endless questions about flowers, bugs, and why the sky sometimes turned pink at sunset. The following week introduced a routine that felt both new and strangely familiar. Sutton showed up in the garden almost daily, never announcing himself or offering elaborate excuses. Sometimes he brought a new tool he thought Claire might need. Other times, he simply sat on a nearby bench to work on his laptop, occasionally lifting his gaze to watch her. The girls had grown used to him, running to him whenever they arrived after school, eager to share what they'd learned that day, to show him new drawings or small treasures they'd found. A blue feather, an oddly shaped leaf, a tiny snail. "Mr. Sutton, why don't bees sting flowers?" Junie asked one afternoon as they watched a bee land on a daisy. "Because they need the flowers to survive," Sutton replied. "The flowers give them nectar, and the bees help the flowers grow by carrying pollen from one to another." "Like friends," Lila suggested. "Exactly like friends," Sutton smiled. "Some people call it symbiosis, but friends is an easier way to explain it." Claire, busy pruning nearby rose bushes, overheard the conversation and felt something shift inside her. Sutton was now providing the patient answers she had always tried to give. And there was something in how he explained the world to the girls, without oversimplifying, without underestimating their ability to understand. At night, back home, the girls spoke of him naturally, as though he had always been part of their lives. "Mr. Sutton said he's taking us to see the turtles in the pond out back tomorrow," Junie announced during dinner. "He says they're shy, but if we're really quiet, they'll come out. He knows the name of every tree in the garden," Lila added, wide-eyed, "even the really hard ones." Claire listened, torn between contentment and caution. Part of her rejoiced to see the girls forming a genuine bond with someone else. Another part feared the inevitable attachment. What if it all fell apart again? What if Sutton grew tired of this simple life and reverted to the ambitious man she once knew? But with each passing day, those fears seemed less valid. The Sutton she saw now wasn't the hot-headed young man of 10 years ago, nor was he a complete stranger. He was someone familiar yet new, like a plant you know well, but that blooms differently each season. In the third week, Claire arrived earlier than usual. The girls had a school field trip and would be gone all day. The morning was cool, the sky a pale blue promising warmth later. Dew glistened on the grass as she headed to the tool shed. When she opened the door, she froze. Sitting on the workbench where she normally left her gloves and pruning shears was a small deep blue ceramic vase holding a perfect bouquet of fresh lavender. Its purple, a bright contrast against the vase. No note. None was needed. Claire stepped forward slowly, as if the vase might vanish at any sudden movement. She touched the petals gently, breathing in their soft fragrance. Lavender, her favorite since forever. She remembered a conversation years ago, lying in a field after a picnic. She had mentioned how lavender reminded her of her grandmother's home, the only place she felt truly safe as a child. How she loved the lingering scent on sheets, clothes, everything. He had remembered. Even after 10 years, he still remembered. Claire picked up the vase carefully, as if holding something both precious and fragile. A warmth spread through her chest, rising to her throat, where it formed a lump. Such a simple gesture, just flowers in a vase, and yet it meant so much. He wasn't trying to wow her with grand gestures or promises. He wasn't pushing for a second chance or asking for more than she was ready to give. It was just a small acknowledgement. I see you. I remember who you are. Claire sat on the stool in the shed, still holding the vase, letting herself feel. In recent years, her life had revolved around survival, about being there for her daughters, about building a stable and safe life. She'd built a wall around her heart, not out of bitterness or fear, but out of necessity. There was no room for vulnerability when two little people depended on her for everything. But now, holding that vase of lavender, she sensed a small crack in that wall. Like a persistent seed finding space in seemingly solid stone and beginning to sprout, something inside her was awakening. It wasn't the same feeling as 10 years ago, that overwhelming passion that consumed everything in its path. This was calmer, more rooted, a quiet awareness of possibility. Claire placed the vase back on the bench and began her day's work, though something within her had changed. With each action, digging in the soil, measuring space between seedlings, pruning dead branches, she felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in a very long time. By midday, she heard footsteps approaching. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. "The lavender is beautiful," she said, continuing to work on a bed of perennial plants. "Thank you." Sutton stopped beside her, hands in his pockets, looking out at the garden. "I passed by a flower market downtown. Couldn't resist." Claire nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Neither mentioned the shared memory, the deeper meaning. They didn't have to. "The girls aren't here today?" he asked, noticing the absence of the twins. "School trip to the aquarium. They'll be back late this afternoon." Sutton nodded, gazing up at the clear sky. "Perfect day to be outside." "Yes, it is." They fell into a silence that wasn't awkward. It was like the silence between musicians who know the tune so well they no longer need words. "I was thinking of having lunch on the terrace," Sutton said after a while. "Harlan prepared more food than I can eat alone. Would you join me?" Claire paused her work, finally looking at him. There was no pressure in his face, only a genuine invitation. She realized she no longer saw the ghost of the younger Sutton in him, just the man standing before her, with new lines on his face and a calm only years could bring. "I should wash my hands first," she said, removing her gardening gloves. His smile was gentle, just a small curve of his lips, but it reached his eyes. "I'll take that as a yes." Walking side by side to the house, Claire felt the warm sun on her shoulders and the scent of newly opened roses. She thought of the lavender in the shed, of her daughters who would soon return with stories of colorful fish, of the quiet man next to her. Perhaps, she thought, this is how things truly grow, not in dramatic bursts, but through small moments of care and attention, through comfortable silences and simple gestures, by recognizing that sometimes the strongest roots are the ones that take their time, finding their way through difficult ground, reaching for the light at their own pace. Summer wore on, turning the garden into a kaleidoscope of color. The seedlings Claire planted in her first weeks now bloomed in vibrant flowers, attracting butterflies and hummingbirds. The sunflowers the girls had planted already towered over them, their giant golden faces following the sun's daily path. A new routine settled in with an ease that sometimes startled Claire. In the morning, she worked alone in the garden, enjoying the quiet and the soft early light. In the afternoon, when the girls came from school, Sutton frequently appeared, almost as if he had an internal sensor telling him they had arrived. On a particularly warm day, Claire watched from a distance as Sutton showed the girls how to build a simple irrigation system for the strawberry patch they had adopted. He'd brought hollow bamboo sections and was explaining how water could flow from a higher level to a lower one. "It's like a little staircase for the water," he explained, kneeling to their level in the soil. "Water always wants to go down, so we use that to guide it where we need it." Junie, always impatient, shoved her hands into the dirt before he could finish the explanation. Lila, on the other hand, studied him carefully, absorbing every detail. "Will the strawberries grow faster now?" asked Lila, her big eyes locked on him. "Not exactly faster," Sutton replied, "but they'll be happier. Plants are like people, they need the right amount of water and sunshine, not too much, not too little." Claire smiled at his explanation. Sutton never spoke to the girls as though they couldn't grasp complex ideas. He treated their questions seriously, answering with honesty and patience. In recent days, the girls had started waiting for him. They asked about him when they arrived and seemed genuinely disappointed on the rare days he didn't show up. "Mommy, do you think Mr. Sutton will like the picture I drew for him?" Junie asked one morning, showing a brightly colored page supposedly depicting the garden. "I'm sure he'll love it, sweetheart. I drew all of us in the garden. Look, this is you, this is me, this is Lila, and this is Mr. Sutton." Claire studied the drawing, feeling a tightness in her chest. 4 stick figures holding hands, with huge smiles on their round faces. All around them, colorful flowers and a smiling sun. It was the image of a family. "It's very pretty," Claire said, hiding her emotion. Later that same day, Lila came home from school with a plant identification book she'd borrowed from the library. "Mr. Sutton said we can look up all the plants in the garden here," she explained seriously. "We're going to make a catalogue. He's going to teach me how to write the scientific names." Claire nodded, gently brushing Lila's dark hair. Lila had always been the more studious twin, fascinated by facts and names. Seeing how Sutton recognized and encouraged that curiosity filled Claire with a quiet joy. One Saturday afternoon, Claire was surprised by the sound of laughter coming from the other side of the garden. Following it, she found Sutton and the girls in the midst of an elaborate treasure hunt game. He had hidden small objects around the yard, colorful shells, shiny stones, miniature animal figures, and created riddles for each hiding spot. "I'm green and long, I drink water through my roots, and I help butterflies find their way," read Junie in a loud voice, frowning as she tried to solve the clue. "The jasmine vine," Lila shouted after a few seconds, already racing in that direction. Sutton followed them, pretending he didn't know the answers, feigning exaggerated surprise at every discovery. Claire had never seen him so relaxed, so genuinely happy. The serious, controlled man she had known seemed replaced by someone who didn't mind kneeling in the dirt, making funny voices for a snail they found, or bursting into laughter when Junie placed a crooked daisy crown on his head. The girls adored him, that much was clear. The way they ran to him when they saw him, the way they clamored for his attention, the way their eyes sparkled when he joined them, and, surprisingly, he seemed to adore them in return with a devotion Claire never thought him capable of. Sutton, who had once been so focused on achievements and success, now spent hours explaining to Lila the difference between a beetle and a ladybug, or helping Junie build fairy houses out of fallen twigs and petals. Claire watched all of this with a blend of conflicting emotions. Joy at seeing her daughters form such a special bond, gratitude for Sutton's patience and kindness, but also fear, an overwhelming fear that crept into her chest late at night when everything was quiet. What if they got hurt? What if he tired of this role, of this simple routine? What if the old Sutton, the ambitious, restless one who always looked for the next challenge, came back? The girls had already lost one father. Claire couldn't bear seeing them go through another abandonment. And there was something else, something Claire hesitated to admit even to herself. She, too, was growing attached. Not just to the Sutton who played with her daughters, but to the man who left a cup of coffee in the tool shed for her on chilly mornings, the man who listened intently to her ideas for the garden without interrupting, the man who looked at her as though he still saw something wonderful, even after all these years and changes. One night, as she was tucking the girls into bed, Junie mumbled drowsily, "Mommy, why doesn't Mr. Sutton live with us?" The question caught Claire off guard. She pulled the blanket higher, buying time to form an answer. "Because he has his own house, honey. But he could come live here, or we could live there. His house is really big." Claire swallowed, feeling her heart clench. "It's not that simple, Junie." "Why not?" The question hung in the air. Claire stared at her daughter's sleepy face, so innocent, so unaware of the complexities of adult life. For Junie, it was simple. They liked Sutton. Sutton liked them. So shouldn't they just live together? The adult world, with its fears, insecurities, and old scars, didn't factor into her understanding. "Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out," she finally replied. "Now go to sleep, it's late." Later, sitting alone on her small balcony, Claire looked up at the stars, faintly visible between buildings, and felt the wall around her heart, so carefully built over the years, beginning to crack. Tiny fissures appeared, letting in hope and possibility. And it terrified her. Sutton called on a rainy Tuesday, Claire's weekly day off from the garden. The girls were at school, and the apartment was quiet, but for the rhythmic drumming of rain on the windows and the hum of the washing machine in the bathroom. "I have something to show you," he said, his voice containing an undercurrent of excitement. "Can I pick you up in an hour?" Claire hesitated. She had planned to reorganize the girls' closet, set aside clothes they'd outgrown, maybe bake some cookies for the week. The domestic routine that, while tedious, gave her a sense of security in her carefully structured life. "It's important," Sutton added, sensing her hesitation. "I promise I won't take too much of your time." Something in his voice, a combination of eagerness and nervousness, made Claire agree. "All right, I'll be ready." Exactly 1 hour later, she heard the sound of a car horn. Looking out the window, she saw Sutton's black sedan parked outside her modest building. It wasn't the luxury vehicle she might have expected, just a reliable, understated model, unafraid of potholes or muddy roads. "Where are we going?" she asked, once inside the car with her umbrella closed. "Downtown. It's a surprise." Sutton drove carefully, keeping his eyes on the rain-slicked streets. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a grey sweater over a white shirt, shoes that looked ready for puddles or dirt. There was a certain comfort in this simplicity she would never have associated with the ambitious young man she'd known years ago. They made small talk on the way, how the new tomato seedlings were doing, Lila's upcoming science fair project, a new species of bird that had appeared by the fountain. Easy conversation, free of tension, like a dance whose steps they both knew. As they approached the city's historic district, Claire's curiosity grew. What kind of surprise did Sutton have in mind? Why all the secrecy? Finally, he parked on a narrow street flanked by well-preserved old buildings. Small shops occupied the ground floors, a charming bakery, an independent bookstore, an antique shop. In the middle of the block, one storefront stood empty, a "For Rent" sign in its dusty window. "We're here," Sutton announced, turning off the engine. Claire looked out at the empty shop. It was small but well located, with large windows that would offer a good view of the bustling street if they weren't covered in old newspapers. A faded, dark green awning sheltered the entrance. "What is this place?" she asked, as Sutton opened a large umbrella for both of them. "It was a shoe store for almost 50 years, he explained, leading her to the door. "Mr. Martin retired 2 months ago. It's been vacant ever since." Sutton took out a set of keys from his pocket and unlocked the door. A little bell above the threshold tinkled, as if the place was still waiting for customers. Inside, the space was clean but empty, save for some shelves on the walls and a sturdy wooden counter at the back. The hardwood floor, though scratched in places, looked solid and well-maintained. A narrow staircase in one corner led to a mezzanine occupying half the upper level. "It's bigger than it looks from outside," Claire noted, slowly turning to take it all in. Even in the rain, natural light streamed through the front windows. The place had a welcoming feel despite its lack of decor or furniture. Something about its proportions and the way the light fell made it feel full of promise. "There's a small garden out back," Sutton added, walking to a door behind the counter. "And a storage room." Claire followed him, feeling an odd sense of familiarity, as if she'd been there in a forgotten dream. Through the back door was a surprisingly large patio, bordered by high walls covered in ivy. Even in the rain, the potential was evident. A hidden oasis in the heart of the city. "It's lovely," she whispered, imagining what she could do with that small patch of land. Raised beds, an herb garden, trellises for climbing roses. Sutton watched her face, a soft smile on his lips. "I thought you'd like it." They returned to the main room, and Claire kept exploring. The mezzanine had a low ceiling but felt cozy, with a circular window facing the street, perfect for a small office or a reading nook. "Why are you showing me this?" she finally asked, descending the stairs. Sutton drew a deep breath, gathering courage. "Because it's always been your dream," he said, "your own flower shop." A place to create, grow and share your passion for plants. You told me about this in our first week together. Remember? Claire felt the air leave her lungs. She vaguely recalled that conversation, one night on the college campus, stars above, sharing dreams under the safety of darkness. She'd talked about someday opening her own shop, a place where she could create arrangements that told stories and teach others to see the beauty in nature. A youthful dream she'd shelved when life forced her to choose stability over passion. That was such a long time ago, she murmured. Some dreams don't age. Sutton stood in the middle of the empty floor, turning slowly as if he could already see what it might become. I pictured seasonal flowers in the windows, he said, pointing around. Shelves for smaller plants there. Maybe a big table in the center, so you can make arrangements in front of customers. The mezzanine could host workshops, teaching floral arranging or small space gardening. Claire watched him, overwhelmed by a wave of conflicting emotions. It was exactly how she would imagine it, like he'd stepped into her most private dreams and translated them into reality. Sutton, she began, her voice trembling slightly, I can't afford a place like this. And even if I could, opening a business requires capital, planning, time. He held up a hand, gently stopping her. I'm not giving it to you as a gift, he clarified calmly. It's an investment. Actually, you'd be doing me a favor. This building has been in my company's portfolio for years. It sits empty most of the time. I'd rather see someone who truly cares about it turn it into something special. Claire paced around, touching the walls and running her hand over the wood counter. It was tempting, so tempting it hurt. A dream she thought she'd buried was resurfacing, beckoning her to believe. I'm not sure, she finally said. I need time to think. It's a huge decision. Sutton nodded, not pressuring her. Of course, take as long as you need. The property's not going anywhere. He hesitated, then added gently, and neither am I. In the days that followed, Claire found it impossible to think of anything else. While she worked in the mansion's garden, cooked meals for the girls, band or lay awake at night, the image of that empty shop haunted her, inviting her to fill it with her dreams. She told the girls about the offer one evening over dinner, spaghetti with homemade tomato sauce. A flower shop, Junie's eyes widened. You'd sell flowers. And arrangements, Claire explained. Bouquets for special occasions, house and office plants, maybe even small gardening classes. Like Mr. Sutton's garden. But yours? Lila asked, ever practical. Sort of, Claire smiled. But different, smaller, more personal. The twins exchanged looks, a silent twin-to-twin communication that never ceased to amaze Claire. Are you going to do it? Junie asked at last. Claire sighed, swirling her fork in the sauce. I don't know, sweetie. It's complicated. It would change our routine, risk the stability we've built. But you smiled when you talked about it, Lila observed, with a surprising wisdom that sometimes emerged from her shy nature. You don't smile like that when you talk about the mansion job. Claire felt a knot tighten in her throat. She did love working in Sutton's garden, but ultimately, it wasn't hers. Despite all the freedom she had in making decisions, she was still an employee tending someone else's property. It's different, she tried to explain. At the mansion, I get a steady paycheck, fixed hours, security. But it's not yours, Junie said, with the straightforward logic of a child, summing up what Claire couldn't quite articulate. That night, after the girls fell asleep, Claire sat on the tiny apartment balcony, gazing at the few stars visible between buildings. She thought about the fear holding her back, not just the practical fear of failure or financial risk, but a deeper fear. What if she said yes and it didn't work out? What if she ended up needing Sutton's help to keep it afloat, owing him more than she could ever repay? What if she failed? Life had never given her anything for free. Every achievement, however small, had come from hard work, strict budgeting, sacrifice. Accepting something so significant, something so aligned with her deepest passion, from someone with whom she had a complicated history, felt dangerous. Yet for the first time in years, she felt a spark of excitement that went beyond mere survival. She could envision herself in that space, creating, nurturing, building something truly her own, a place where her daughters could see her following her passion, not just her obligations. The next morning, while making coffee, Lila shuffled into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mommy," she said, in that small but determined voice, "you deserve a garden of your own." Those words, so simple and so profound, struck Claire like lightning. Her daughters, who had witnessed every struggle, every sacrifice, who had seen her count coins on the kitchen table at night, believed she deserved more, not just to survive, but to thrive. That afternoon, Claire phoned Sutton. "I want to see the place again," she said. "Her with the girls this time?" When they revisited the shop, Junie and Lila ran excitedly through the empty space, chattering about where the flowers would go, what they'd call the store, whether they could have a corner just for themselves. Claire felt the last remnants of resistance within her crumble. This was a risk worth taking. Not for Sutton, not even just for her daughters, but for herself. For the dream she'd tucked away on a high shelf in her heart, waiting for the right time to bloom. "I'll try," she told Sutton, who watched the girls playing in the backyard. "I can't promise it'll succeed, but I want to try." His smile, reserved, respectful, yet deeply satisfied, felt like a ray of sunshine after a long storm. "That's all anyone can do," he said. "Try." The transformation of the old shoe store began on a Monday morning. Claire arrived early, keys in hand, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the lightness of hope. Unlocking the door, the little bell chimed like a herald of new beginnings. She carried a notebook filled with sketches and scribbled ideas from nights of productive insomnia. Morning light flooded through the dusty windows, creating beams that danced on the wooden floor. Claire breathed in the scent of old wood and new possibilities. She wasn't alone for long. Sutton arrived half an hour later, dressed in faded jeans and a simple t-shirt. So unlike the polished executive who ran a successful company, he brought 2 cups of coffee and a quiet excitement that matched Claire's mood perfectly. "Where do we start?" he asked, looking around curiously. Claire spread her drawings over the sturdy old counter. "Painting first. I want a soft green on the walls, like young leaves in spring. The ceiling should be lighter, almost white, to reflect the light. And we need to remove those newspapers from the windows so the sun can fully shine in." Sutton studied her sketches, asking practical questions about furniture placement, workflow, and workspace requirements. He never questioned her aesthetic choices, only helped translate her vision into actionable steps. They fell into a familiar dance. She dreamed, he structured, like old times, but tempered by new maturity. Over the next few days, the space began to transform. Harlan had recommended a small yet reliable team for structural repairs, reinforcing the floor, fixing the ceiling, updating the wiring. Claire insisted on paying them herself, and Sutton, understanding her need for independence, did not argue. Afternoons were reserved for the work they could manage on their own. Sutton turned out to be surprisingly handy with basic carpentry, building sturdy shelves for pots and plants, and a custom workbench for Claire to assemble arrangements in front of customers. "Where'd you learn to do that?" Claire asked, admiring the neat finish on a newly built shelf. "My grandpa was a woodworker," Sutton replied, sanding the wood with skilled precision. "I spent a lot of summers in his workshop as a kid. Guess some of it stuck." This was a side of Sutton she'd never known, his family roots, the influences beyond his ambition and professional success. It amazed her how 2 people could spend so much time together, yet still keep so many secrets. What other layers were left to discover now that time had softened the edges of their past? On weekends, the girls joined in. With the bold creativity of children, they attacked the newly painted walls with colorful murals, fantastical flowers, butterflies the size of dinner plates, fairies hidden among giant leaves. Claire had set aside a special corner for their art, near the area designated for kids' products and plants. Junie, unable to contain her excitement, chattered constantly as she painted, "I'm gonna help after school every day. I can make little bouquets, I know I can. And I'll take care of the baby plants. We can name them, right? Each one deserves a name." Lila, more methodical, had already created a color-coding system for different types of plants, explaining patiently to Sutton, "Green for shade plants, yellow for sun lovers, blue for thirsty ones. That way no one gets confused." Mommy's gonna need help keeping track of all this. Sutton's laughter echoed through the space, an increasingly common sound, as if the simple joy the girls radiated had rubbed off on him. Your mom doesn't need help remembering plants, he teased, winking at Claire over Lila's head. She could write a book about every flower out there. Claire felt her cheeks heat up with something that had nothing to do with physical effort. It was a compliment, yes, but more than that, an acknowledgement. He truly saw her, recognized her passion and expertise. One particularly productive afternoon, Claire was organizing the small office space in the mezzanine. She came downstairs to find Sutton and the girls on the shop floor, surrounded by dozens of plain terracotta pots. Armed with paints, they were transforming these simple containers into colorful works of art. Some with precise geometric patterns, Sutton's meticulous style, others with chaotic bursts of color, Junie's style, and some with delicate flowers painstakingly painted, Lila's style. For the first plants, Sutton said when he noticed Claire watching. I figured customized pots would be a nice touch. Claire felt a rush of warmth seeing the three of them together, engrossed in a task simple yet deeply meaningful. It was an image she never thought possible, her daughters and Sutton creating something side by side, each by choice rather than obligation. At night, back in her small apartment, Claire felt a new sense of belonging, not simply in the practical sense of having help with the store, but at a deeper level. Her decisions, her fears, her small daily victories, now there was someone to share them with. I think Westbrook's supplier has better prices on perennials, she mentioned one evening, going through catalogs at her kitchen table after the girls were asleep. But Greenville's supplier is more reliable, Sutton countered, having joined them for dinner more often these days. And they're closer, meaning fresher plants and less transport stress. Simple, practical conversations, free of drama, so different from the heated debates of a decade ago when every discussion felt like a minefield. Now there was space to disagree without destruction, to yield without feeling defeated. Work in the backyard garden was especially gratifying. The once cluttered, deserted patio had been transformed into an urban oasis. Sutton surprised Claire one day by showing up with a small fountain he found at a junkyard, a stone structure, weathered by time but charmingly rustic. They installed it in the garden's center, surrounded by raised beds where Claire planted herbs and flowers for cutting. The girls took responsibility for creating a fairy corner in a shady spot, tiny sculptures made of twigs, painted stones, miniature wooden doors affixed to tree trunks, a whimsical space that delighted adults as much as children. After 4 weeks of intensive work, the metamorphosis was nearly complete. The once empty space now overflowed with personality. Soft green walls provided the perfect backdrop for dark wooden shelves and counters. In the center, a spacious work table allowed Claire to assemble arrangements in full view of customers. In the mezzanine, a cozy area with cushions and plant books offered space for small workshops. On the eve of the grand opening, Claire was applying a final coat of varnish to the handmade sign that would hang over the front door. Roots and Petals, Flower Shop. Simple, straightforward, personal, like her. Nervous? Asked Sutton, arranging the final details in the display area. Scared to death, Claire admitted, flashing a shy smile. What if no one comes? What if too many people come? What if I forget the prices? What if all the flowers wilt at once? What if everything goes well? Sutton interrupted gently. What if this is just the beginning of something amazing? What if all those fears are just the price of admission to something incredible? Claire looked up, meeting his gaze. Those same green eyes she once knew so well, now rediscovered. There was no pressure in them, no impossible expectations, just a calm confidence that was exactly what she needed. How do you do it? She asked, setting aside the paintbrush. Do what? Seem so sure it will all work out? So, at peace with the uncertainty? Sutton took a moment to think, his gaze drifting over the space they'd created together. Because I've seen you start over before. I've watched you turn nothing into something incredible. He smiled, a small but genuine smile. And because this time, you're not alone. The store's opening was a modest but meaningful success. Curious neighbors, a few of Sutton's business contacts, friends of the girls from school, a steady flow of visitors filled the space with chatter and excitement. Claire moved between them, explaining different plant species, demonstrating simple bouquet arrangements, and answering questions on basic plant care. The girls, wearing miniature aprons matching Claire's, handed out small succulent pots as a souvenir for each customer, their own idea, executed with Sutton's help in the preceding days. They beamed with pride, hosting with a seriousness that made adults grin. Harlan surprised everyone by arriving with a basket of homemade breads and pastries from the mansion's cook. "To go with the coffee," he said with his usual formality, though his eyes sparkled with satisfaction at seeing how the space had been transformed. In the following weeks, a new routine took shape. Claire opened the shop early after dropping the girls at school. She worked alone through the morning, fulfilling orders and tending the plants. In the afternoon, the girls came straight from school, finishing their homework on the mezzanine or helping with small tasks. Sutton appeared almost daily, sometimes just for half an hour to bring coffee, other times staying until closing, helping with deliveries or chatting with customers. Gradually, the flower shop began to put down roots in the community. The cafe on the corner ordered fresh bouquets every week. The middle-aged barber bought succulents for his shop. Young couples came looking for plants for their new apartments. A retired teacher became a regular at the Wednesday gardening demos Claire held. It was a life Claire never envisioned possible, stable, yet not stagnant, secure, but full of new daily challenges. The girls flourished in this environment, proud of their mother, knowing every customer by name, growing up surrounded by both beauty and purpose. One morning, Claire found Sutton waiting at the shop door before she'd even opened. He looked uncharacteristically nervous, something unusual for his steady composure. "I had an idea," he said abruptly. "I'm not sure you'll like it, but I wanted to share it before I lose my nerve." "Now I'm intrigued," Claire replied, unlocking the door. Inside, he unrolled a small sketch on the counter. It was a plan for an addition to the back of the shop, a modest but well-designed greenhouse where Claire could grow more delicate plants and experiment with new varieties. "I know the garden space is small," he explained, "but if we use part of that unused storage area and expand a bit, it might work." Claire studied the drawing, feeling both excitement and hesitation. It was perfect, exactly what she'd envisioned for a future phase of the business, but it also implied another measure of dependence, another debt she might owe Sutton. Sensing her thoughts, he quickly added, "It would be an investment from the flower shop itself, not from me. You're already making enough profit to consider expanding. I just wanted to help with the planning." Claire looked up from the sketch, meeting his gaze. It was true, the shop was doing surprisingly well. More importantly, it was hers, really hers. And expanding with her own resources was a real possibility. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I'll think about it, really think." His smile said everything she needed to know. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, nearly 2 months after the grand opening, Claire was alone in the shop. The girls were on a class trip with an overnight stay, and the silence felt like a sweet, well-deserved rest. She was experimenting with new flower arrangements, mixing unconventional elements with classic blooms. The chime above the door pulled her from her thoughts. Without looking up from a branch of eucalyptus she was arranging, she called, "Good afternoon." "I'll be right with you." "Take your time," replied a male voice. Something about the tone, the cadence, made Claire freeze. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. A man in his mid-30s, tall, with short brown hair and light-colored eyes, stood near the entrance. He wore jeans, a plaid shirt, and a light jacket. He looked older, more solid, with a neatly trimmed beard he didn't have before, but there was no doubt. Mark, the father of her daughters. Claire felt the blood drain from her face, her hands suddenly cold, her heart pounding so loudly it hurt. How did he find her? Why now, after all this time? "Claire," he said, taking a hesitant step closer. "I didn't know. I came to buy flowers for my mother. I saw the sign for roots and petals, never imagined." It seemed too big a coincidence to be real, yet here he was, as real as the blooms in her fingers, bringing back memories she had carefully buried. "Mark," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. "What are you doing in this town?" "I moved back 6 months ago. My mom is sick, cancer, late stage. I came to help with her treatment. the house. His voice caught. I never expected to find you here. Someone mentioned a new flower shop in town with amazing arrangements. I had no idea. He looked around, taking in the space, the flowers, the evidence of a life built without him. This place is yours. It's beautiful. I always knew you'd do something like this someday. Claire didn't respond, her hands continuing to arrange stems on autopilot. Anything to stay anchored. I'm sorry to show up out of the blue, he continued, when she still didn't speak. If you want me to leave, I will. I can come back another time, when you're ready. Or never, if you prefer. There was a maturity in his tone that hadn't existed before, a willingness to accept rejection that the Mark she'd known would never have shown. Just then, his gaze fell on the framed photos on the counter. Claire with the girls on opening day, the three of them beaming in front of the shop. The twins had grown so much since they were newborns, yet they still had his eyes, his face, shape. Mark froze, as if physically struck. His complexion paled noticeably. They're, he faltered, they're my daughters. The question hung in the air, heavy with a decade of absence. Claire felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. They're my daughters, she corrected, her voice low but firm. Junie and Lila. They're 7 years old. Mark swallowed hard, visibly shaken. His eyes never left the photo. They're beautiful. A pause, a shaky breath. They look like you, the smiles. And like you, Claire admitted grudgingly. The eyes, the face shape. A dense silence settled between them. How do you speak to the man who gave you twin daughters and then vanished? What words could fill a 7-year void? Claire, he finally said, almost in a whisper, I know I have no right. I know I made the wrong choice. The worst choice possible, but... He took a deep breath like a man summoning courage. Could I meet them? She felt something crack inside her. Anger, confusion, fear, swirling in a vortex that threatened to swallow her. Why? Why now? Because I've changed, he said simply. I'm not that scared kid running away from responsibility anymore. I spent years trying to find you both, but you disappeared completely. When my mum got sick and I came home to help, I never imagined I'd get this chance. Mark took a step back, as though sensing he was intruding on her space, physically and emotionally. I started therapy 4 years ago. I'm learning to face my choices, not run from them. I worked hard to become someone worthy, someone who could look them in the eyes without shame if I ever got this chance. His eyes met hers, filled with a sincerity Claire couldn't decide was genuine or crafted. I'm not asking to be their father. I don't deserve that. I just want the chance to know them, to apologize, to maybe be part of their life, even if it's from a distance. Whatever they deserve, whatever you allow. Claire took a shaky breath, trying to calm the storm in her head. She thought of the girls, of their natural curiosity, the questions beginning to surface about a missing dad. She thought of Sutton, of the relationship he'd built with them, of the role he played in their lives. She thought of herself, of the walls she'd built and the doors she was slowly opening. I can't give you an answer right now, she said at last. I need time. I have to think about what's best for them. Mark nodded, accepting her boundary. I understand. Completely. He pulled out a business card and set it on the counter. My number, in case you decide to call. No pressure. He looked again at the photo of the girls, a look of regret and pain etched on his face. They look happy. You've done an amazing job, Claire, raising them, building all this alone. His voice cracked on the last word. I'm sorry I wasn't there to help, to see it. Please tell them, no, don't tell them anything. It's not fair to ask that of you. He chose a small pot of violets, my mum's favorites, paid, and walked to the door. Before leaving, he paused as if wanting to say more, but simply nodded and left. The door closed softly behind him, the chime echoing through the quiet shop. Claire stood there, the card burning in her closed fist, torn between the past she'd tried to leave behind and the new life she was painstakingly creating, just when everything was finally falling into place. When Sutton had become a constant, reliable presence, when the girls finally had stability and security, when her own heart was beginning to believe again in possibilities. Claire slipped the card into the drawer beneath the cash register. She wouldn't throw it out, nor would she rush any decision. She would take her time, consider carefully, and always put the girls first, like she always did. She looked around the shop she'd built from nothing, at the thriving plants under her care, at the photographs capturing her new life. So many choices to make, so many paths. Yet for the first time in a long while, she felt not just the weight of her decisions, but also the strength to carry them. As evening fell over the little flower shop, Claire watched through the window as lights flickered on in nearby stores, people hurrying home, the city winding down. A regular life, an everyday life, once all she had wanted. Now, with Mark's unexpected return, she stood on the threshold of a new phase, one that would require balancing past and present, protecting what she'd built while making room for new possibilities. It was terrifying, yet she felt an odd calm knowing that this time she wouldn't face these decisions alone. Claire lightly touched the photo of the girls, their smiling faces catching the day's last golden light. Any choice she made would be for them, always for them. And maybe, just maybe, this time, she could do it for herself too. Night settled slowly over the small flower shop. Through the windows, Claire could see people heading home, streetlights flickering on. A normal, unremarkable scene, yet she felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, uncertain whether to jump or step back. There were so many unanswered questions, so many new chapters, but for the first time in a long time, Claire didn't feel just fear. She felt possibility, and that was enough to guide her forward, little by little. "Mommy, what if he comes back?" Junie had once asked her, about a father they never knew. Claire remembered brushing away the question with vague words. Now, faced with the man himself, she realized that question no longer had a simple answer. Early morning light filtered through Claire's window before the alarm even rang. She lay awake, thoughts spinning about Mark and what lay ahead. 3 days had passed since he'd appeared in her shop, and each minute felt elastic, stretching long with indecision. Despite everything, the flower shop thrived, the girls were happy, and Sutton remained a comforting constant. Then Mark returned, turning it all upside down again, carrying a business card and sorrowful eyes that spoke of regret and growth. Claire quietly got out of bed, careful not to wake her daughters in the next room. In the small kitchen, she brewed coffee and sat at the table, holding Mark's card in her hand. It was simple and professional. Mark Daniels, landscape architect, address on the west side of town, phone, email, an orderly life, so different from the impulsive, commitment-fleeing boy she'd known. "Because I've changed," he had said. Claire wanted to doubt him. It would have been easier if she could dismiss him as the same irresponsible man. But there was something in his eyes, clarity, weariness from confronting his own failings. She recognized that look. She saw it in the mirror every morning. The man who'd abandoned her pregnant with twins wasn't the same one who showed up in her shop. Time had shaped him as it had shaped her. The difference was, she had tangible proof of her growth. 2 healthy girls, a successful business, the scars she wore with dignity. What did he have, beyond words and regretful eyes? "Regret isn't redemption," she muttered to herself, watching the steam rise from her mug. That morning, as she opened the shop, her routine felt automated. She smiled at customers, arranged bouquets, checked inventory, all while her mind drifted through possibilities and fears. Sutton arrived around noon, as he often did, carrying sandwiches from a local deli and wearing that calm smile that had become his signature. But his eyes held a question, an unspoken concern Claire couldn't hide. "I brought lunch," he said, placing the bag on the counter, "and I also brought this." From his pocket, he pulled out a small wooden box, intricately carved with leaf and flower patterns around the edges. The lid opened in 2 parts, revealing compartments that fit perfectly inside. "For the girls to store seeds," he explained. Lila mentioned they were collecting different types for a school project. Claire ran her hand over the polished wood, feeling the meticulous craftsmanship in every curve. He must have spent hours carving each leaf, each petal, a gift specifically tailored to the girls' interests, to who they were. "It's beautiful," Claire said, her voice quieter than usual. "You're not quite yourself today." Sutton observed gently, without pressing. Did something happen? Claire hesitated. She could lie, say she was tired. But they were building something on honesty, something they never had before. Mark showed up at the shop 3 days ago. Sutton's expression didn't shift drastically, but she noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the cautious gleam in his green eyes. The girl's father, he said, not as a question but as confirmation. Claire nodded and told him, briefly, about the unexpected reunion, Mark's mother's illness, his discovery of the twins, his desire to meet them. He wants to know them, she concluded. Sutton was silent a moment, absorbing. When he spoke, his voice was controlled, but she sensed his effort to keep calm. What are you going to do? I don't know. Claire grabbed a bouquet of flowers and began to arrange them, needing something to occupy her hands. Part of me wants to protect them, keep him away. He left before they were even born. What right does he have now? Sutton nodded thoughtfully. And the other part, he prompted gently. Claire paused, a flower held mid-air. The other part thinks maybe they deserve to know where they come from, who he is, to have a chance to decide for themselves. She placed the bloom into the bouquet with care. And maybe I need that too, so I can fully move on. A flicker of unease crossed Sutton's face, quickly contained. Claire realized her words could be interpreted in many ways. Moving on with Mark, without Mark. With Sutton? She herself wasn't sure. Is there something wrong, Claire? He asked, voice steady but with a rare vulnerability. Claire looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had re-entered her life as unexpectedly as Mark, who helped transform her dream into something real, who played with her daughters like they were the most precious things in the world, who respected her independence without belittling it. I'm confused. The raw honesty of that statement lingered between them. Sutton didn't retreat or show frustration. He just nodded slowly. That makes sense, he said. It's a lot to deal with. Claire felt an overwhelming rush of gratitude that nearly broke her. How many men would respond with understanding instead of jealousy, patience instead of ultimatums? Thank you, she said, meaning far more than the words could convey. Saistitid to them that night. After putting the girls to bed, Claire sat on the floor in their bedroom, her back resting against the wall between their two beds. Lila had rolled over in her sleep, her head now on Claire's leg. The room was lit by a small mushroom-shaped lamp, a gift from Sutton a month earlier. In her hand, Claire held an old photo, its edges worn from being handled so often. The girls as newborns, tiny in their hospital bassinets, two little pink bundles with their eyes closed, unaware of the complicated world they'd entered, or the absence that would mark their lives. She remembered those first months, sleepless nights breastfeeding one baby while the other cried waiting, the fevers that terrified her, the day both girls smiled for the first time, almost simultaneously, as if sharing a secret. She was alone through all of it, alone for every milestone, every decision, every fear. Where was he when we needed him the most? She whispered into the silence, her heart heavy with memories of battles no one witnessed, tears no one wiped away. Lila stirred in her sleep, murmuring nonsense. Claire gently stroked her dark hair so like Mark's. There was no denying the genetics. The girls had his eyes, face shape, and even Junie's frown of concentration. And what if he really did change? The question came from a part of her still capable of believing in second chances, in growth, in redemption. What if they want to know him? They were getting older. Soon they'd have more questions about their father, questions Claire had answered only superficially. He's far away. He wasn't ready to be a dad. Sometimes adults aren't ready when children come. They were kinder truths than the raw reality. But how long could she protect them from it? And did she have the right to decide if they should meet him? Claire slipped the photo back into its envelope and gently moved Lila's head onto a pillow, covering both girls. She checked the window and returned to her own room. That night, she dreamed of gardens, some meticulously planned, others wild and free, paths that branched out and intertwined, never revealing where they might lead. The next day, in the flower shop, Claire watched Sutton set up a support frame for a newly arrived climbing plant. His hands worked with precision and kindness, ensuring the structure was strong enough to hold growth without stifling it. A metaphor, she realized. That was how he treated her, like a plant needing both support and freedom. "I've made a decision," she said suddenly. Sutton looked up, waiting. "I'm going to let Mark meet the girls," she said, her voice more certain than she felt. "A brief meeting here at the shop, with you present, if you can be." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, possibly concern, but also a deep respect for her choice. "Are you sure?" he asked. "No," Claire admitted with a small smile, "but I think it's the right thing to do. Not for him, but for them and for me, so I'm not always wondering what if." Sutton nodded, thoughtful. "What will you tell the girls?" "That he's an old friend. For now. If things progress, I'll tell them the truth when the time is right." "When?" "Saturday afternoon. The shop is usually quieter. The girls will be here anyway." Sutton turned back to finish securing the plant, looking pensive. "I'll be here," he said simply. "If you want me." "I do," Claire answered without hesitation. "I need you here." Saturday arrived with a clear sky and a gentle breeze, the kind of perfect day that seemed made for pivotal moments. The twins were excited to meet Mommy's friend, not asking many questions beyond whether he liked plants too. Claire arranged a small seating area in the garden out back, some chairs, a low table with juice and cookies, hoping the casual setup would ease the tension. Sutton arrived early, bringing a board game he knew the girls loved. While they got engrossed in the colorful pieces, he approached Claire, who was anxiously straightening some cushions. "It's okay if you change your mind," he murmured. "At any point." Claire shook her head. "I need to do this, for all of us." Right on the dot of 3, the door chime rang. Claire's heart pounded. She exchanged a glance with Sutton, who nodded reassuringly and went to greet their visitor. Mark stood in the doorway, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, not the typical florist's arrangement, but something clearly gathered in a field and tied with a simple ribbon. He wore dark pants and a pale blue shirt, hair neatly combed, looking nervous. "Hi," he said, voice slightly unsteady. "Hope I'm not late." "Perfect timing," Claire replied, trying to keep her tone even. "Come on through. We're in the back." He walked through the shop, openly admiring everything as they went. "You've created an amazing space," he said. "It's exactly what I pictured you'd do one day." They arrived at the backyard, where the twins lifted their eyes from the board game, curiosity lighting their faces. Sutton rose from his chair, remaining a bit off to the side, an ever-watchful presence. "Girls," Claire said, her voice softer than usual, "this is Mark, an old friend I haven't seen in a long time." Mark crouched down to the girls' level, still holding the wildflower bouquet. Claire saw the unspoken emotion in his eyes, but he kept himself in check. "Hello," he said gently. "I'm a friend of your mum's. May I know your names?" Junie glanced at Claire for confirmation. With a slight nod from her mother, she answered, "I'm Junie, and this is my sister Lila. We're twins." "Twins," Mark repeated, as though the word held special magic. "It's so nice to meet you both." To Claire's surprise, it was Lila, the quieter twin, who spoke next. "Do you like flowers? Mom has the prettiest ones in town." A genuine smile brightened Mark's face. "I like them a lot. In fact, I work with gardens, too." "Like Mr. Sutton?" Junie asked, pointing to where he stood. "Something like that," Mark said, glancing briefly at Sutton, the two men sharing a silent acknowledgement. Mark handed the small wildflower bouquet to the girls. "I picked these for you. They grow near my mother's house. Thought maybe you could identify them." The girls received the bouquet eagerly, immediately examining each bloom, racing to see who could name more varieties. The rest of the visit went more smoothly than Claire expected. Mark chatted with the girls about plants, school, and favorite books, safe, child-friendly topics. He didn't force closeness or ask personal questions. He kept a respectful distance from Claire's boundaries. The girls, in turn, were open and curious, not rejecting the stranger who carried their genes without their knowledge. A natural connection seemed to form, gently and without pretense. When it was time for Mark to leave, he thanked everyone calmly, without drama or rushing. He promised the girls he'd bring them a book about wildflowers on his next visit. "If your mom says it's okay," he added, glancing at Claire with respect for her authority. Claire walked him to the front of the shop, leaving Sutton and the girls in the garden. "Thank you," Mark said simply. "They're amazing. You've done an incredible job." "Yes, I have," Claire replied. No false humility. It was a hard-won truth. "Can I see them again?" Claire hesitated only a moment. "We can try baby steps, Mark." "It's all I can manage," he nodded, accepting her terms. "It's more than I deserve." After he left, Claire returned to the backyard. The girls were back at their board game, excitedly discussing the new friend and the flowers he'd brought. Sutton stood slightly apart, watching them with a thoughtful expression. Claire joined him. "Thank you for not pushing me," she said in a low voice, "and for being here. I couldn't have done this alone." He turned toward her, green eyes reflecting the soft afternoon light. There was a depth there, an understanding beyond words. "I'm here because I want you whole, Claire," he said gently. "Even if that means sharing space with the past." The simplicity and generosity of his statement overwhelmed her. Without thinking, she stepped forward and hugged him, burying her face in his chest. It was the first time she allowed such vulnerability since reconnecting. A hug that wasn't just a casual greeting, but a heartfelt gesture of gratitude, acknowledgement, maybe even a promise. Sutton returned the embrace gently, one hand on her back, the other lightly stroking her hair. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. His presence said all she needed in that moment. That she wasn't alone. That hard choices become lighter when shared. That there was room for past and present to coexist, as long as the future stayed open to possibilities yet unwritten. Summer gave way to fall with a slow, almost imperceptible transition. First just a few golden leaves amidst the green, then a morning chill, and finally a riot of color painting the city's trees. At the flower shop, Claire adjusted her arrangements to the new season. Warm-toned chrysanthemums, red berries, foliage in shades of bronze and gold that celebrated the beauty of change. Like nature, Claire's life went through its own subtle shifts and cycles of renewal. In the 3 weeks since Mark's first meeting with the girls, a new routine emerged, one Claire never imagined possible. Mark visited the girls twice a week, always at the flower shop, always for short, clearly defined periods. He brought books about plants, told them stories of his travels, showed them little tricks like whistling with 2 overlapping leaves, a skill Junie mastered quickly and practiced at home until Claire begged for 5 minutes of quiet. "Mark showed us how maple seeds twirl like helicopters when they fall," Lila said during dinner one evening. "He said nature invented helicopters before people did." "And he drew all the parts of a flower," Junie chimed in, never wanting to be outdone, "with scientific names. I'm taking it to school tomorrow." Claire listened with a mix of emotions, pleasure at their genuine excitement, maternal caution, and a constant sense of surprise at Mark's patience. He wasn't trying to buy their affection with lavish gifts or outlandish promises. He wasn't forcing intimacy. He was simply there, offering small discoveries and building trust one step at a time. "You haven't told them yet?" Sutton asked one evening as he helped Claire close the shop. The girls had gone with Mark and their grandmother to a local park, promising to return promptly in an hour. Claire shook her head, arranging the last pots. "Not yet. It feels too soon." "Do you think he'll respect that? Not telling them?" "Yes," Claire said, surprised at her own certainty. "He knows he has to earn that right. We've talked about it." Sutton accepted her answer without further questioning, one of the qualities she admired most in him. He never tried to override her decisions or assume he knew better, and that wasn't the only quality she was beginning to appreciate more each day. As time passed, Claire saw more clearly how Sutton had become an indispensable part of her life, not by intruding or dominating, but by simply belonging. He showed up at the shop almost daily, sometimes just to drop off coffee and talk for 10 minutes. On Thursday nights, when she closed early, he often joined them for dinner at her tiny apartment, helping the girls with homework before Claire prepared a simple meal. On weekends, he took her and the girls on little outings, a botanical garden in a nearby town, a rural craft fair, a lakeside picnic, small adventures that created memories, bonds, and a present that didn't erase the past but complemented it. Somewhere in the midst of it all, Claire felt herself reorganizing inside. It was no longer guilt she felt over letting Mark see the girls, nor fear that his presence would upend the delicate balance. It was a calm understanding that she was making mature choices, no longer driven by desperation or impulse, but by thoughtfulness. She wasn't running away anymore, as she had done 10 years ago when she left Sutton. Nor was she simply surrendering to circumstances, as she nearly did during those difficult years of single parenthood. She was building something new, something complex, honoring both past and present. One quiet morning at the shop, Claire found Sutton in the backyard, talking with the supplier who had just delivered winter seedlings. He negotiated deadlines, discussed plant varieties, a familiarity evident in his tone, as though he were a full partner in the business. "You didn't have to be here today," Claire said when the supplier left. "I thought you had that big investors meeting." "We moved it to tomorrow," he replied with a shrug. "Wanted to be here for the delivery. I know how excited you were for those hellebores." Claire smiled, touched by what seemed like a small gesture but meant so much. "You're steady," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "You always have been, haven't you? Even when we were young and all over the place, deep down you were solid." Sutton raised his eyebrows, surprised. After a moment, he smiled gently. "Maybe so, but you taught me to be flexible too, to bend without breaking. Like plants," Claire thought. "Like bamboo that bends in a storm and remains standing when everything else is uprooted." The rest of the day passed in its normal rhythm, a few regular customers, deliveries to prep, the phone ringing with new orders. Junie and Lila arrived after school, heading upstairs to do homework in the little nook Claire had set up for them. Near closing time, Claire stepped out into the garden. The autumn sun cast a golden light across the plants, creating long shadows and a magical glow on the leaves. On the small porch, she saw a scene that made her heart stop momentarily. Sutton sat on the wooden bench with Junie asleep in his lap and Lila dozing on his shoulder. The twins, worn out after a busy day, had succumbed to sleep in his presence, the kind of instinctive trust children show only when they feel completely safe. What touched Claire most was the look on Sutton's face. He watched the girls with a mixture of wonder and protectiveness, as if he cradled something too precious for careless hands. Claire quietly moved closer, then sat beside him. Without thinking, she leaned her head on his shoulder beside Lila's, sensing the familiar warmth of his body and the calm rhythm of his breathing. "They called you Dad today," she said softly, "when you stepped out to take that phone call." Junie asked, "Will our dad like this drawing?" And Lila didn't correct her. Sutton remained still for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled with subdued emotion. "I heard, and I nearly lost it." Claire lifted her face to look into his. Those green eyes that once made her lose her footing, then made her flee and now offered her a safe harbor to simply exist. "You know," she said, voice filled with a new understanding, "we haven't built a family in the traditional way, but what we have here is so much more beautiful." He gently took her hand, squeezing with a tenderness that spoke louder than words. "It's real," he said simply, "and it happened at the right time." The girls slept peacefully. The sun lit the flowers in the entryway. A soft breeze carried the scent of autumn, not the smell of an ending, but of transformation. And for the first time in years, Claire felt complete. It was as though all the seasons of her life, springs of discovery, scorching summers, autumns of loss, and lonely winters, had been leading her here. There is a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to leave and a time to stay, a time to protect and a time to open up. And finally, after so many detours and fresh starts, the time to simply blossom had arrived. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.